of the SVU US Board of Trustees. And I'm being two things today, the lay leader and board member thing. And that means I get to read more things out of this book to you. And by the way, thanks for having that great party and you know, doing all the stuff that you did for this congregation last night. Yes. Okay. Welcome. Oh, As we begin, I ask that you please place your electronic devices in worship mode. I invite you to enjoy the chapel in the back of the sanctuary and to note the joys and concerns in the book there. Please feel free to share a joy or a concern there. How many of you do that? You should do that. We would like to hear that. Children are always welcome in the sanctuary at all times during the service. If you'd like, however, to have us take care of your little ones during the service, we have a nursery downstairs. We also broadcast the service on closed-circuit TV, which is located downstairs in the social hall near the nursery if you need to stay near the nursery. After the service, everyone is invited downstairs for coffee and snacks in excellent company. Finally, please note the announcements in your order of service, which include many ways to participate in the life of this vibrant community. And right after this meeting, there's a couple of other meetings, so, you know, check them out and see if you're going to go to them, because, you know, they're important. I'm still learning this whole process. Okay. In the words of Rumi, come, come, whoever you are. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears, you are welcome here. I'm welcoming myself back. I've been gone for a month. No matter where you've been, no matter where you're going, you are welcome here. No matter what body brought you in the door, no matter who you love, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all the time, or some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. If you come here with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, you are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. That's kind of been adapted by Reverend Bob, which I like the changes. Okay.
Thank you, Judith. And let me add my good morning and welcome. And for those of you who were at the auction last night, nice work getting here today. What an awesome event. I want to say a big thanks to everybody who put the auction together. So if you worked on the auction in one role or another, can you just stand up? Would you mind standing up? Amazing. A very special thanks to Marilyn and Kristen, who really honchoed all this, did a fantastic job leading. You know, one thing I like to say is everything we do is faith formation, even the auction. And so the way that we work together on that is an expression of our UU values. And I saw that last night. It was so fun and welcoming and groovy. So thank you. So the elections happened on Tuesday, and there were a lot of races and a lot of ballot questions. And so I think it's hard to make a sweeping generalization about the outcome and its relationship to our Unitarian Universalist values. But I want to focus for a moment on one of our 7 principles in particular, the 5th principle. And just to remind you, the 5th principle affirms the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. And it's time that we drop the illusion that we have a representative democracy in this country. So consider this: 4 of the sitting Supreme Court justices have been appointed by presidents who lost the popular vote. And folks probably here know all this, but the voter suppression, much of it targeted at black and brown people, the It's rampant, gerrymandered districts. I can't even with the money. So this is a very important fight that we're in to take back or recreate democracy. And I want to hold up the example of one of our partner congregations, All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. They recognized the problem, and in 2014, they began to partner with Unitarian Universalist congregations in North Carolina, which is one of the worst states for rigging elections. And All Souls has sent hundreds of volunteers down to North Carolina, doing rallies and marches and massive voter registration drives. And they did amazing work coming right out of, absolutely inspired by our Unitarian Universalist values, our theology, our principles. And you can learn more about it. You can go to the All Souls DC website, check it out. And also, if the work, you want to do the work here, if you go to the South Valley Facebook page, you can see how you can support the Unitarian Universalist Association effort to make sure that there's a democratic election in Georgia. That race is not over yet. So, I know it's weird to talk about politics on Sunday morning, but our values are at stake here. And I don't think I'm overstating when I say the future of our country depends on this work. After church at 12:15, I'll be hosting a community chat in the Trailblazers room downstairs. This is an open opportunity to come talk to me about whatever is on your heart or on your mind. And I hope to see you there, especially if I've never had a chance to talk to you one-on-one so far. You're especially invited. Okay, just one more thing. I know I'm going on a bit here, but this morning I'm really delighted that we're singing Rivers of Babylon out of the Teal hymnal. Folks may remember some of the reggae versions of the song, and it was indeed written by Rastafarians. I realized after the fact that my choice may have been inspired by the success of the Prop 2 referendum for medical marijuana. I don't know. But the song, it also uses words from Psalm 137. So it was written in 1970, but it has this quality of modern and ancient together. And I think it's an appropriate song for a service about veterans, because so much of the experience of serving in the military is about finding oneself in strange lands, both while we're deployed and when we come back home. Also, Babylon is the old name for the area that is now called Iraq. So, as we journey through all these strange lands and these very strange days, my hope is that we may draw resilience from this beloved church community. So come, let us worship together. Please rise in body or spirit to sing hymn number 1042, Rivers of Babylon.
So our chalice will be lighted by Ada Christensen. Oh, okay. Well, I try. Okay, you want to say it?
It's a team effort. All right, please be seated, and let's inviting the young folks up for our quick talk. All righty. Thanks, brother. Hey, get comfortable. How y'all doing? Everybody's welcome. Sit any way you need to sit. All right. What's going on today? You all right? Who woke up to snow? Yeah, amazing, huh? It's on. Okay, so 100 years ago today, people know what happened 100 years ago today? Who was alive here 100 years ago today? Yeah, what happened? You saw it, tell us what happened. World War I ended, nice work, there was peace, yeah. That's right, at 11:11 today, the gun stopped firing. Awesome, yeah, our scholars. Oh. What do you want to share? Give your hand up. Nothing? Okay. Anyways, so they called it a world war because there were a lot of countries involved, right? And they called it one because it was the first big war. And it was supposed to end all the wars. So who knows what they called the next war? World War II. So how'd that work out with the war to end all wars? Not so good, huh? Anyways, so the way the war was fought, it was a really weird war. People would dig, the different sides would dig these long trenches that were deeper than I'm tall. And then the other side would also dig a long trench, and they'd be like really close. Like they could actually hear each other talking. Hey, Maki. That's right. So for a long time, the trenches just stayed in the same place, and they just like looked at each other. And every once in a while, everyone would get up and on one side and try to run over to the other side and take the other side, and there'd be all this shooting, and it'd be horrible. Yeah, it was not good. But back in 1914, it was Christmas Eve, and it was really freezing cold. Let me finish my point. And it was really cold, and everybody on both sides really did not want to be there. They wanted to be home celebrating their holiday with their family and not fighting. And all of a sudden, people started to put candles up on the edges of the trenches. Both sides were covered with candles. And on both sides, people started singing carols, Christmas carols. And they started harmonizing and singing together, right? So, and then they started shouting back and forth, and they decided that they were going to declare a truce just for that night. Okay, what? That's right, yeah. And they declared the truce, and they came out and met in the middle, and they smoked cigars together and played soccer and hands. And then when it was done, they went back, and they built a bonfire, and then they went back to their trenches. And then the next day, this is so weird, they went back to fighting the war. And that's so strange, right? Isn't that kind of strange? Like no, it's just like, I know, why not do it for a month or like years? It was supposed to be the war to end all wars. Well, what it does show us is that it's always possible to make peace, even if it's temporary. And people would usually rather have peace than war, right? Okay, so that's the story. Thanks, guys. All right. I invite you now for a moment of prayer and reflection. Today is both Veterans Day and the Transgender Day of Remembrance. And so I'm choosing to pray using the words of Reverend Sarah Lawal, who's the Unitarian Universalist minister serving our Boise, Idaho congregation. In Reverend Sarah's words, Spirit of life and love, God of many names and no names, source of all. With tender hearts, we remember. We remember those who struggled to live their true, bold, authentic life, and who were taken from us too soon. Who endured extreme violence instead of deep love. May we pledge ourselves anew to offer welcome and blessing with pride and gratitude. We remember. We remember those who served our country with courage and dignity, some taken from us too soon. Who endured a violence we will never know for the cause of peace. May we pledge ourselves anew to honor their service and serve the cause of peace together. With tears and pain, we remember. We remember the souls caught in the rage of a man with a gun, taken from us too soon, who endured unnecessary violence instead of joyful celebration. May we pledge ourselves anew to raise our voices for change. With tears and pain, we remember. With the rage of a people witnessing too many moments that threaten our democracy, our freedom, our humanity, may we pledge ourselves anew to put our faith in action, live out our principles, to be the change. With the joy of beloved community, committing to expanding our hearts, to opening our minds, to nurturing deep roots to serve each other and the world, may we pledge ourselves anew to lead with hope and possibility, even in the face of despair. For justice, for equality, for compassion, for liberty, for spiritual growth, for democracy, for dignity, for truth, for world community, for this precious planet, for radical hospitality, for community, for joy, for love, for love, for love, for love, for love. We pray. In the name of all that is holy. Amen.
It is our practice here at South Valley to split our worship service offerings with a charitable organization or program that aligns with our values and principles. For November and December, the offering will be split with the Rape Recovery Project. The RRP, it is a trusted community provider of direct services in primary prevention education in Utah. Will you join with me in saying the words printed in the order of service for our offering? We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share in the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts.
Blessings on these gifts and the givers. I want to read a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, called Please Call Me by My True Names. Please call me by my true names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving. To be a bud on a spring branch. To be a tiny bird with still fragile wings. Learning to sing in my new nest. To be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower. To be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of a river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant, selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I'm a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and my laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. So, folks know me to varying degrees here. I just want to say before I start, I'm a former artillery officer in the United States Marine Corps. I served from 86 to 90, got out right before the first Gulf. I also served as a civilian contractor in Afghanistan, running X-ray machines that they use at the gates to check people in vehicles for bombs. I also worked as a chaplain at the VA hospital in New York City. So I've seen a lot of different sides of the veteran issue. Today I'm thinking about veterans, of course, and I'm thinking about two veterans in particular. The first is Army Major Brent Taylor, who died in Afghanistan last week. He was also the mayor of North Ogden, and he was killed by Taliban forces posing as Afghan army members. I'm also thinking of Ian Long. Ian Long, a former Marine who served in Afghanistan. He was a machine gunner. He served there as well. And he died this week too, after killing a dozen people in a bar in California. Brett Taylor left behind a wife and 7 children. Ian Long lived with his mother. When Major Taylor died, people kept speaking about this being the price of freedom. I haven't heard anybody say that about Ian Long, despite his clear struggles with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm not going to say it's the price of freedom either, but I will say this: I think the more accurate thing is to say it's the cost of war. This is a sermon about stories, and I'm going to start with one about me. So about a week or so after I came home from my year in Afghanistan, I was in New York City. And I gotta tell you, New York City is a great place to visit after a year in a war zone. For me, it was mostly the food. There's this deli in the Lower East Side called Russ and Daughters. That's where you can get liver spread on an egg bagel with fresh sliced dill pickles on it. They were not serving that in the chow hall back in Kandahar. And New York City is a great place to come home to until it isn't. And for me, that isn't moment happened when we went into some store in Midtown, and it was more like a nightclub. There were like lights flashing and really loud music and mirrors, and I got thoroughly triggered and I panicked. And I rushed out of the store, leaving my then wife behind. Unfortunately, we were close to Central Park, and I kind of ran into the park and found a quiet place, found a bench in a quiet spot, and it took me a while to settle down. My wife caught up with me, and coming home, it's a mixed bag. So when we're deployed overseas, everything is about coming home. It's when we can take off our uniform and return to our civilian status and hopefully the home that we left behind. Coming home is the moment when we become veterans. And it's joyous. Coming home means beds and beer and eating off of plates that don't have those raised section dividers. And it means love and family and the pride of survival and accomplishment. And unfortunately, we know all too well that coming home is hard for some veterans. Some don't do it by choice. Injuries or force reductions cut their careers short. Others return to broken families. And still others wrestle with the mental and physical wounds that last long after their part of the conflict is done. And the families and friends who want to welcome their beloved veterans home, they may be confused. They may not know what to say or how to say it. So with your permission, I'd like to do a roll call. If you wish, please raise your hand if you fall into one of these categories. Just want to see who's in the room. So first, raise your hand if you're currently on active duty or a member on active duty in the military. Didn't expect that. Raise your hand if you're currently in the military reserves or National Guard. Okay. Raise your hand if you served in the military at one time or other. Thanks, gents. Keep your hands up if you don't mind. Raise your hand if you have a parent or a sibling or a child who's currently on active duty in the military. Raise your hand if you have a parent, sibling, or child who's ever served in the military. Most of the room. Go ahead and put your hands down. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. I could go on, think of every other category of engagement with the military, but most of the folks sitting in this Unitarian Universalist sanctuary are somehow connected to the military. And all of us, taxpayers, pay for the bullets and the uniforms and the jet fuel and the hospital rooms. So in that sense, we're all part of it. So for me, I was a cavalry scout in the Army National Guard at a unit in Albany. As I mentioned before, I was an active duty artillery in the Marine Corps. I worked as a chaplain at the VA, and I did a fair amount of work with a great veterans organization called Soldier's Heart, which speaks directly to the issue of moral injury. What I'm saying is that this is personal for all of us, I think. And because of my experiences, I've come to believe that one of the things that keeps veterans from truly coming home, and that keeps families and friends from genuinely welcoming those veterans home, is the stories that we tell ourselves about veterans. And by we, I mean both civilians and veterans. I think those stories keep us in isolation, and they keep us from having the real conversations that can lead to a genuine homecoming. So the first story that veterans tell themselves is that no one can understand what I went through. I hear that a lot. So when soldiers, and I'm using soldier as a shorthand term for all military, and I apologize to the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps, Coast Guard. So our soldiers, that experience can be extreme, and the circumstances can certainly be unique. But the kinds of feelings they end up with are more common than that story conveys. So let's look at two major conditions that are the experiences that are what veterans can experience. So post-traumatic stress disorder, like I had, and moral injury. So the Veterans Affairs Administration called these two conditions, along with traumatic brain injury, the signature wounds of the Iraq and Afghanistan era. So PTSD, moral injury, traumatic brain injury. So PTSD is a condition that develops after a person has an intense experience of bodily harm or fear of bodily harm. It doesn't have to happen to experience PTSD. And as I talked about, I brought home some PTSD from my time in Afghanistan. I can't point to a specific incident that caused it. I think it was just the steady drip, drip, drip of the random rocket attacks that were made on my base in Kandahar. The base was equipped with this kind of radar that could sense when there was incoming fire. And when that happened, these massive sirens would go off all over the base. And we'd have 10 or 15 seconds to get to a bunker, which were scattered everywhere. You were never like more than 100 yards from a bunker. And most time it was a huge airfield, like miles across. So, I never even heard the rounds hit. But the constant possibility of attack took its toll. And when I first got back to the States, sirens in particular and loud noises in general made me both fearful and rageful. I would get so angry, full body sweat, fury. And for me, it was a little taste of what people with really severe PTSD experience. PTSD is common for civilians too. So women who are trapped in domestic violence situations, victims of crime or industrial accidents, they all have something to share with people who have PTSD from their time in the military. And I think many people actually can understand what veterans went through, or at least a good part of it. And I think this is true with moral injury too. So moral injury is the result of perpetrating or failing to prevent an act that someone knows in their core is wrong. So the experience of moral injury, of allowing something to happen or accidentally doing something that you know is profoundly wrong, it creates a deep, deep shame that shakes victims to their souls. So inadvertently killing a civilian is a good example of an act that causes moral injury. But a policeman who shoots an unarmed suspect, or a subway train operator who runs over a person who jumps on the tracks, they're just as prone to moral injury. And there are less dramatic, but can be equally powerful experiences of folks. I've heard from teachers who tell me they feel trapped in education systems that aren't acting in the best interests of their students. And the feeling they describe to me is moral injury. So understanding that these are human reactions rather than something that only happens to the military, that can help veterans feel less isolated and maybe find support in their communities. The isolation is a terrible thing. The second story that we tell ourselves about veterans is that all veterans are heroes. So let me say this, let me preface this by saying I'm not trying to diminish military service. I'm standing here as a veteran. But everyone's experience of service, and especially of war, is different. And some folks have experiences that they deeply regret. When I was at the VA working as a chaplain, I was amazed and humbled by the number of Vietnam veterans who are still tormented by what they had seen and done 40 years ago. Also, there are veterans who are part of the 3,000 active duty military who are sexually assaulted every year. And for these folks to be told that they are a hero does not help them. And this statement, we're going to hear a lot of this today if you get back into the media after church. Thank you for your service. It's really loaded. It's really loaded. I personally never really know how to react when people say to me, thank you for your service, Bob. I think it really depends on who's saying it and what the context is. Sometimes I hear from folks who want to justify their bigoted opinions by saying that they're patriots too. And other times I know it's heartfelt. It's really confusing for me. Confusion is a common state for veterans, I think. There's a wonderful book called by a writer named Kevin Powers called The Yellow Birds. The title comes from a chant that soldiers will sing while they're running, cadence. So Mr. Powers is an Army veteran. He served in Iraq. And in the Yellow Birds, there's a scene where the main character, who is also a veteran of Iraq, he's been kind of holding up in this like remote place of the country, and he sees a group of his old friends from high school playing in the river while he's sitting on the opposite bank. And he's very alone and he's very lonely, but he still doesn't approach them, even though they know him and he knows them. And he notes to himself, he says, and now I'm reading a quote from the book, "I had become a kind of cripple. They were my friends, right? Why didn't I just wade out to them? What would I say? Hey, how are you?" they'd say. And I'd answer, "I feel like I'm being eaten from the inside out, and I can't tell anyone what's going on because everyone is so grateful to me all the time, and I feel like I'm ungrateful or something. Or like I'll give away that I don't deserve anyone's gratitude, and really they should all hate me for what I've done. But everyone loves me for it, and it's driving me crazy." So this little quote, that's the end of the quote, it shows really well, I think, the complexity of feelings that a veteran can bring home. Heroism may or may not be one of those feelings. And so we have this veterans are heroes story on the one side, and then on the other side, the other story that we tell is that all veterans are victims. And so it's this idea that anyone who serves in the military, liberals love this one, by the way, everyone who serves in the military does so because they're trapped in a web of economic and social brainwashing. And they couldn't help it, they didn't know what they were doing. And like I said, this is like, I'll own this, as our people, like progressives do say this a lot, but it's wrong, it's not backed up by the data, and moreover, it's just unhelpful. It's totally unhelpful. What it does is it demeans veterans by implying that they have no agency. By that I mean that they made no choices on their own. Believe me, having been there, most folks who join the military are excited about the opportunity. When I went in, I got prestige, I got money, I got training, I got to travel, got to play with cool gear. So the idea that there's a poverty draft that forces people into the most dangerous jobs, it's just not supported by the facts. And this relates back to moral injury. It actually makes the moral injury worse because it doesn't help someone to tell them, if they're feeling bad, hey, you were just doing your job. The veterans know better. They know that they always had choices, even if they were sometimes very hard choices. That's what causes the moral injury. They knew they could have made another decision. I think anytime we try to extract personal responsibility completely out of any story, we take away some of the complexity and I think some of the humanity. So these are just some of the stories about veterans, but it doesn't have to end there. So our Unitarian Universalist movement does not have a great record with welcoming veterans home. But that is changing. So many folks who were protesting the Vietnam War regret conflating the war with the warriors. And they're seeking to make amends during our current period of forever war, 18 years to 17 years. Our congregations and our communities now have a good resource to help us with this. The UUA has created a military ministry toolkit that lays out a set of structured conversations and attitudes towards the war and military. We can get this curriculum for free from the UUA website, and it's well done because the conversations build on each other. So they start with relatively safe topics like, what messages did I receive growing up from my family about the military? To frankly, the more complicated issues, it builds on that about the ethics of war. And through this slow build, people who might reflexively fall into conflict find areas of common ground and mutual compassion. And I've done the program twice, and I'm happy to do it again here. I'm sure I would learn new things. If folks are interested, just let me know. It'd be a combination of veterans and civilians talking together. In this reading that I just did, the poem, Please Call Me By My True Names, Thich Nhat Hanh explodes our habit of creating either-or dualities. We're both the mayfly on the river and the swallow swooping to eat it. We're both the Ugandan child and the arms trader. We Unitarian Universalists love to talk about how we're connected by the web of existence. And Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a survivor of the war in Vietnam, he's asking that we look past the simple versions of each other to the richness inside. And that insistence on seeing the complexity, seeing the richness, that is our work with and as veterans. A real homecoming is one where the traveler and the welcomer meet and see each other as their true selves. Whether they are broken or relieved or overjoyed or confused, real return means seeing each other clearly and honestly. These stories that we tell ourselves, they stand in the way of that seeing, and we need to move past them. Let's create a space for people, for civilians and veterans alike, to tell their own stories their own way. Because it's through our own genuine, honest stories that we truly come home. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to sing hymn number 121, We'll Build the Land, in our great hymnal. And I just want to acknowledge this is an old hymn, so the language uses a gender binary, brothers and sisters. That's old language. I wouldn't use it today, but we're still going to sing the hymn. Which one were you going to do? Because that was kind of cool too. But let's try 1, 2, anyone. What do you say?
Barb Zimmer, beautiful work today. Thank you, and thank you, Tara, too. May we say our true stories out loud, and may we listen clearly, and may through this, may we come home genuinely. Our worship is over. Our service begins. Go in peace.